Tonight we have Brenna Jennings. She's lived in Portsmouth since 2006. She mostly got rid of her Long Island accent in college. She's been performing with Couch to Mike since 2020, but she's really famous here in Portsmouth for her spreadsheet rating bacon, egg, and cheese sandwiches. Let's check that out. Brenna Jennings.
I'm so grateful every time I don't trip up the stairs. I ironed for you guys tonight. So, I have trouble relating to people who loved high school. And I have nothing against them. It's just that, like, love is not a word I would ever use to describe what I had in high school. I attended high school. I graduated high school. I survived high school. Those 4 years were a little tough. At the time, my family was still renting, so we were just like a little too poor. I'm tall, been like this since about 7th grade. I have a big butt. All of that stuff doesn't make for a great high school experience. It was like endless commentary. It got way too much attention. You know, when you're a kid, like everybody wants to be smaller, and then when you're a grown woman, everybody wants to like touch it and be gross about it. And just constant comments, friends, family, friends, boyfriends, family, teachers, coaches, weird gym teachers, total strangers at the mall. One time in my 20s in broad daylight, a man jumped off his bicycle and helped himself to a really aggressive handful of it. And he sidled up next to me and he was like, "You got a nice ass, bitch." And I was like, "Yeah, hey, can I just get the part back that you have right now?" Actually, the last time I performed this show here, I was in the lobby afterwards, and a man I had never seen before in my life very enthusiastically approached me entirely too close as I was talking to my husband. And he was like, "Hey, that story was so good, I almost came over here to grab you." And I feel like this goes without saying, just for everybody in the room. Please don't fucking do that. So we're in a time where it's like okay to have a big butt now, right? I've accepted it, I've grown into this body, I've had it for 50 years now, so it's kind of my thing. But in the 80s, when I was in high school, it wasn't a white suburban thing to have. We didn't have J-Lo yet, she was still a backup dancer. We didn't have Baby Got Back until I was well into college. The Kardashians who were alive and born had not yet had their first surgeries. And so it made things a little difficult. I got teased a lot, I got bullied a lot. I couldn't find a pair of jeans literally until I was in my 30s. That is not even an exaggeration. And back then, it looks like most of you will remember this, you were there. We didn't have like anti-bullying initiatives, right? Like my daughter every now and then has to wear like orange. The whole school wears orange and they all go to the assembly and it's like, here's how to be nice to your friends. We actually had to take a class that some of you probably participated in where they taught you how to bully. It was called dodgeball. And I suspect there's a pretty substantial overlap between people who were good at dodgeball and people who loved high school. Over the course of those 4 years, I was invited into and then booted right back out of Gifted and Talented because I think the nerds didn't even want to hang out with me. It's bleak up here. But I managed to make a few friends, a handful of good friends, and I really think that, like, if, God forbid, I had died during those high school years, some of my other classmates definitely would have come to my funeral, if only so that they could put charity work on their college essays. it was not a good time. The 80s were so hard, you guys. I did have a bright spot, though. I had a crush on a boy named Keith for most of high school. He was Gap ad preppy. He wore wireframe glasses that like curled behind his ears. He had dirty blonde hair, and sometimes he'd sweep it out of his face like this. Keith drove a white Volkswagen Cabriolet convertible that he parked. Oh, you guys. I have a picture with it. I have a picture with that. He parked it in his parents' driveway, which is over on the rich side of town, and he was pretty popular, and despite all of this, he was a genuine friend. Like, he was a really good guy. And so he and I, a couple times a week, would have these hours-long phone calls, and we really didn't talk. We would play music in our rooms separately, and you could just like hear each other's music. Sometimes I'd like hear him breathe a little bit. And so I'd be in my room, and it was probably The Cure. And he'd be in his room, and it was probably The Smiths. And this was back before liking Morrissey was an enormous red flag, like right out of the gate. And I need to like just set your expectations here, because if it's starting to sound like this is going in the direction of a John Hughes underdog love story, know that I was so invested in and so convinced of my high school pariah status that on one of those calls when Keith actually asked me to go to the junior prom with him, like maybe me and you could go together. I responded by panicking, laughing, and slamming the phone down. You guys remember slamming phones? I almost feel bad that kids can't slam a phone. So good. So the best nights were when Keith would come over, and so we would like ignore each other for hours in person. But there were snacks. We'd have snacks. And we'd sit in my house and listen to our music, and usually my two younger sisters were around. They were about in elementary school at that point. They were already cooler and more popular than I could ever hope to be at this stage of my school career, being both average height and proportional butted. And they weaponized my crush on Keith at every opportunity. And so on this one particular night, he was over, and I remember I was feeling like extra worked up. I was extra anxious and uncomfortable, and I didn't want to seem awkward around him. And I was super focused, everything I had, on not seeming as anxious as I was, which is a tactic I'm using right now. And so, because of this intense focus on myself, I was the last person to notice that our wiener dog was coming out of the bathroom down the hall, having just used her otherwise almost useless little stupid legs to topple the bathroom trash and deliver face up at the LL Bean deck-shoed feet of the love of my life, my used maxi pad. Now again, some of you may not know this. I think most of you do. This will be for the men and the children in the room. At this point in feminine hygiene history, those things were not... They didn't have the belts anymore. My mom told me about the belts. But you know, now I'll go get a box, and you can get like 100 of them, and you could fit the whole 100 in your pocket. Back then, just one of them was like a cheesesteak. And every time you moved, it sounded like your crotch was eating a bag of chips. And so I'm in this room, and my two sisters, they saw this coming. They saw the dog at the end of the hall. And they didn't intervene. And they owe me a drink. One of them's here. They let that dog walk in and just leave the rest of my social life bleeding on the floor. And so I'm dissociated. I'm having an entire out-of-body experience. My John Hughes night is the prom scene from Carrie now, because I'm like, they're all gonna laugh at you. And my sisters are like, we're laughing at you. And the dog is so proud of herself. And I'm floating somewhere around the ceiling, looking at this poor, sad nerd. And I'm wondering if I can fake my own death, because then I could get out of the situation, and also maybe some of my classmates could go to their top choice colleges. And I'm looking at my sisters, and they're in gulping laughs, so I'm wondering maybe they'll lose all their breath and pass out. Now Keith, because he sincerely was a good dude, simply stands up off the couch, he turns the other way, and he takes an enormous dramatic step over the pad and slips into the kitchen so that I could continue dying atom by atom in privacy. And as I stand there, basically blacked out, I don't know what to do to resolve this, because I'm already a little too poor. I'm way too tall. My butt is very too big. And I cannot now be the girl who's disgusted. So with him in the vicinity, what I probably did was kick it under the couch. Assuming that he had left, why wouldn't you leave? And so the peak of the crisis averted, it turns out he's still there. And he stayed. He stayed for more hours. We had more snacks. We listened to more music. I was probably just dying the whole time, even more worked up than when he showed up. And we stayed friends, and we're still in touch. My crush remained unrequited, but it's actually totally fine. I married an amazing guy who, it turns out, I have a type because he has a lot of similar qualities to Keith. He's pretty quiet. He's very into music. He's definitely not easily grossed out. And he is absolutely way too into my butt. Thank you.